So, in these turbulent times, how do we sustain learning and collaboration across borders for a more resilient future? So that's the question that will be at the heart of our session today, and a very warm welcome to all of those who are joining us, including participants from the Americas and the Latin American and Caribbean hub for TIP, who may be joining on catch-up due to the time difference. So I'm Vicky Shaw, I'm Programme Director for the Transformative Innovation Policy Consortium, and I'm the convener of our Open Learning series. This is a peer learning space for practitioners who are joining from around the world working on transformative policy approaches to share experience and practice. But today we have a very different session. This is a joint event and it's in collaboration with the UNECE Transformative Innovation Network, known as ETIN. We're very happy to welcome members of ETIN to support the network's launch of a new charter, which is for cross-sectoral collaboration on global challenges. Now, the charter is not a tipsy document, but we're happy to have supported this work through our work on the steering group, along with many other groups. And I'd like to thank several members of ETIN who are joining us today. We have Emanuele Bade from UNECE. We have Sandra Bonni from Ingenio and Tipsy. We have Charlotte Naafelt from Vinova. And we have Lena Svensberg from the Compare Foundation and the Digital Well Arena Initiative. So you'll find a copy of the charter in your calendar invitation for the session, and we'll start with an introduction to this by Charlotte. This will be followed by a roundtable that also involves Lena and Sandra, in which these contributors will reflect on the need for this type of document and how its principles are being embedded in practice. And finally, Emanuele will close with more information about the ETIN network and opportunities for learning amongst the wider knowledge community. Now, this series, as always, is intended to support peer networking in some way. So we really invite you to share what you're doing in the chat or to introduce yourself. And as Charlotte introduces the document, we really welcome any reflections or questions, and we'll try to come to these during the roundtable discussion. So we've got lots to get through, so I will hand over now to Charlotte to introduce you to this new charter. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky, and thanks for inviting us and giving us this opportunity to present the Transformative Innovation Policy Charter. And as you pointed out, my name is Charlotte Naafelt. I work as a Chief Strategy Advisor at Vinova, the Swedish innovation agency, but I'm also chair of UNECE's team of specialists on innovation and competitiveness policies. I've been active in ETIN since its start. So I will try to share a presentation with you, and I hope this will work now. You see my presentation in the right mode, hopefully?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Charlotte.
Okay, let's go. This will be a very short introduction to the document, so let's start immediately. What is it? It's a document that really provides guidelines and principles for the design and implementation on transformative innovation policies. And why do we think we need it? Because it creates a completely new policy challenges, because it goes beyond the previous generations of innovation policies and really addresses societal, environmental, and economical challenges that really then goes into different kind of other policy areas also than traditional innovation policies. And it's really a result of the co-creation of that had engaged a group of experts and practitioners from the ETIN network, from EU, from TIPSY, and from the Joint Research Center, EU's Research Center. And what we think it will provide a guiding role when you implement and design transformative innovation policies, but it's also an agenda for developing code of practices, because we really want, and after this event also, to see that people start to engage and use it and really develop code of practices and then share those practices among members of practitioners working with transformative innovation policy. So it is a living document that will be updated and extended as we understand more about how to implement and design transformative innovation policies in different contexts. Oh, I jumped. So if you look at its contents, it had 12 messages and observations that aim to give the reader a broader and deeper understanding of what TIP is all about. But it also includes 20 guiding principles that helps you design and implement transformative innovation policies. And it also ends with a list of challenging areas that members of the ETIN community have identified as areas that would benefit from joint efforts rather than individual initiatives. And of course, we invite you all to become part of addressing those kind of challenges in a collective manner. So one of the first messages is that transformative innovation policies linked to what is called in the third generation of innovation policies. But in our view, it's the third generation is not replacing previous generations of innovation policy. It really extends it. It gives a context for the previous one. So growth, competitiveness, and renewal, which has been really in the center of previous generations of innovation policy, is still important, but this extends into sustainability and other policy areas like environmental, healthcare, education, social welfare, because you have to address them across different political areas when you are addressing sustainability in the way we believe we should do that. So the main observation and message, if I try to summarize it, it's about really how innovation change behavior and interactions between human and organization, because that is what really creates the outcomes of the society and the market. And we know that innovation change behavior. So how can we, with policy initiatives, really intentionally drive that and nudge that kind of changes in behaviors between organizations and people? It means that if you are doing it, you have to understand, embrace, and manage complexity and uncertainty, and really understand that normal distribution is really a special case. Most things in this is highly skewed power law distributed. And so the traditional way of looking at policy intervention with average treatment effect, you have to move from that to completely new ways of looking at that. And this in turn means that it's about embracing experimentally driven and discovery-driven approaches that constantly adapts to changing conditions and lessons learned. So you have to allow that to happen. And there is no silver bullet in doing this or a best practice. There might be good practices that you can learn from, but really you have to adapt it to your culture, your context, your history, and the way you work. So it's really adapting strongly to contextual factors. But still, we believe that inclusive peer learning activities are really important because we are addressing challenges that goes beyond borders and beyond, global kind of challenges, so that we share real-world experiences, explore different approaches to really contribute to addressing societal challenges that we face everywhere. And we also, I just wanted to bring up, when we look at the current funding mechanism for research and innovation or venture capital, they are not really adapted to these kind of TIP properties, which are systemic, which are very long-term, which are working in this kind of complex, uncertain world. So we really need to adapt those to new circumstances. This means that our understanding of transformative innovation policies is illustrated in this figure. We believe that the policy is about mobilizing and establishing directionality and stimulate relevant demand, which also includes phasing out harmless technologies and things like that. It gives a context for experimentation, which then this learning experimentation and learning processes validates and provide corrective feedback to resetting or setting the directionality again and promoting new demands. And this loop is governed by understanding the contextual factors that keep this ecosystem locked in an undesirable state. But it also, you need to develop capabilities within your organizations and in your society on reflexivity, dynamic capabilities that support double and triple loop learning, so that you really, in some cases, question the way you are working, but also question the way you look at the reality you try to influence, the ontological kind of lenses. To give some examples of design and implementation principles, it says that it's a systemic play, and you have to focus on creating a strong ecosystem community, because we believe it's about community-driven ecosystem development. In doing it, as in the previous picture, it's really important that you understand why the system is stuck in undesirable behavior or in the undesirable states, and we give some guidelines for that. Since it's uncertainty, we are very deeply rooted in predictive planning, but we have to go to more experimental-oriented work. And in those cases, you work with affordable loss, because you might lose everything. You cannot predict that everything will succeed. So you work in affordable loss phases and engage those willing, capable, and committing to contribute. You also have to develop the leadership, so it's risk tolerant and can manage complexities and unpredictability during transformative innovation initiatives. It's also important that you integrate the development of institutional frameworks for new and adapted ecosystem as an integral part of the transformative innovation policy initiatives, because these institutional frameworks is designed to create some predictability in an unpredictable world. And I also wanted to, since we're in a tipsy, we really are advocating the use of transformative or theory of change, but not theory of change as a predictive plan to reach outputs, outcomes, and impact. It's really the foundation for a narrative that tells you, why do I believe I will be successful? And as soon as you say that, you have to say, how do I then validate those assumptions? So it's really, I usually joke and say that the theory of change no theory of change survives the meeting of the reality, but it's a very good narrative and foundation to create this kind of experimentally validating initiatives to see, are the assumptions I believe on really true or should I change my design? And lastly, we have a call for action, which I hope you are also listening to, and because we want to have some proposed joint work streams, and the ones that have come up so far in the community is policy experimentation and learning, evaluation practices, how to develop ecosystems, how to improve the innovation enhanced procurements, how to work with place-based innovation efforts. And a common theme, I think, is in all in this is how to utilize the new possibilities that AI and digitalization brings transformative innovation policy. Thank you. That's all. Did I make it in time?
You did. Thank you very much, Lorcan. And it's great to see such a wide range of people here as well who've been introducing themselves in the chat. So we're going to turn now to you alongside Lina and Sandra to talk in a little bit more depth in conversation about the Charter. Now, Victoria, there's no rush with this, but if it's possible to spotlight Sandra, Lina and Lorcan, that would be great. So perhaps we could start by turning to Lina, and I don't know if you could just say a little bit about yourself and your relationship with the ETIN network and your work on this Charter, just to get us going. Oh, I'm struggling to hear you, Lina.
Of course, at least once a day that has to happen.
Yeah.
My name is Lina Svensberg, and I'm based in Sweden, working with Compare Foundation and the Digital Arena initiative. And I'm also part of ETIN, and I've been for the last couple of years. And I'm together with my colleague Jakob Lindvall, I'm co-leading the work stream on innovation enhancing procurement. So that my role in ETIN, and I've also, of course, been part of developing the Charter and so on. Yeah.
Thank you. And Sandra, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Sandra Boni. Alejandra is my official name. I'm based in Ingenio in Valencia, and I'm a member of TIPSI, the Transformative Innovation Policy Consortium, since the beginning. And also I'm leading the European hub of the Transformative Innovation Policy Consortium.
Thank you. And so could we start by perhaps reflecting a little bit, and maybe Lorcan, you could kick off on why there's a need now for this type of document? You know, what is it about current global conditions that mean that we need to change the way that institutions are working together with networks and knowledge communities?
I think, as I pointed out in the beginning, we are trying to really get into a new generation of innovation policies that really are going beyond what was previously done on growth, renewal, and competitiveness, even though and sustainability has been, of course, the core of it. However, I would say that we are getting into a new kind of world where we are struggling with the changing geopolitical conditions, because sustainability is not in the heart of everybody now. It's a lot about defense and competitiveness. So I'm a bit afraid that we might be going back to the previous generations and losing sight of what's so important if we are addressing global challenges we have on this planet, and which covers environmental, societal, and economical challenges.
Thank you. And Sandra, are you noticing similar currents from your perspective of the work that you've been doing with TIPSI?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think we need these kind of approaches, no, to work in this complexity and uncertainty. But let me, Vicky, let me thank a little bit the ETIN group that opened the door for us. No, I remember 2 years ago, you come with me to Geneva, and Mikael, who is around at some point, he invited us to come to Geneva, and that was the start of our collaboration. And I think for TIPSI has been a really nice collaboration to find people like Mikael, Emanuela, Shelokan, that really share with us this interest for transformative innovation policy, experimentation, learning, and these kind of things that for us in TIPSI are super important. Also because we believe in TIPSI that to do transformative innovation policy in this uncertain and complex time, we need to foster this kind of frameworks, no? The Transformative Innovation Policy Framework based in experimentation, learning, etc.
Thank you. Did you have any reflections, Lena, on that?
Yeah, I did. I mean, of course, I agree with everyone that the geopolitical situation has changed the situation a bit compared to a couple of years ago. But on the other hand, I mean, the charter also reflects quite, I mean, how we view the world. It's the complexity and uncertainty and so on. And even if your focus more is on resilience or competitiveness or other fields, I mean, the policies are still, or the guidelines are still very valid in any kind of innovation activities. Of course, we hope we will direct efforts also towards the sustainability of the planet. But regardless, I think that by going back in the generation, that shouldn't mean that you go back to a worldview that's not based on unpredictability and uncertainty.
Thank you. So building on that, what do you see as the main differences in terms of this way of working? What would be the main points of departure from a more traditional approach in your view, Lena?
Yeah, I'm a practitioner. I identify as a reflecting practitioner, and I would say that the big benefits with a charter is that it gives a bit of it phrases and it frames what it actually means to work in complexity and uncertainty, and suggests principles that you can use in your work. And as a practitioner, your work is normally it's a bit of Chinese whisper chain from policies being created and then translated into programs, translated into calls, translated into applications, and then you sit and you're supposed to do something, and you kind of follow what people above you in the chain has been talking about. So there's often a delay of a couple of years from that, at least from that someone has an idea until you start seeing how that works in practice. And this charter is a way to shortcut that and go straight on how do we see the world, how do we think things works, what kind of principles can we hold on to them when we design our actual activities, and create learning around that instead of just being reactive to what someone else has been thinking and that's been translating step by step over years. So it's extremely valuable for me, at least, to have been also trying to work according to these principles for some years, to have them written down and be able to share learning and experiences around what that actually means. I mean, how do you work in a procurement process based on an affordable loss principle? How do you work with power law distribution when you try to create communities instead of consortia? What happens when you try to challenge the funding instruments from a practitioner's point of view? So it's from that perspective, it's extremely valuable.
Thank you. So it sounds like you're describing almost like moving from more of a transactional exchange to a way of working that can mobilize people together. Is that your thoughts as well, Shelokan? Did you have anything further that you wanted to
No, I think Lena put it very, very well. I have also been living in this world for many years, and it's really time that we really try to understand and embrace complexity and uncertainty, which we have been avoiding for many years, and try to find ways of working under those circumstances, as Lena pointed out. And we hope that the Charter will give you good guidelines for doing that, because we have to embrace that and create this kind of also this way of working with single, double, and triple loop learning, so that we are not only trying to improve the way we are working today, but really questioning it and looking in what kind of lenses do we really see the reality we are interacting with. And there comes complexity, uncertainty as central.
Thank you. And Sandra, I mean, Charlotte talked about the different ways of working and learning that are needed, and obviously that's something that's had your attention on TIPSI over the last few years. What would you see as the main characteristics that are different about the way that TIPSI is working and the principles of the Charter?
I think that the principles are really aligned with the way we are working in transformative innovation policy. So, well, maybe the point, there is more focus on procurement and other kind of actions, but the basis is similar, no? And I think one relevant thing is this chart is endorsed by a United Nations commission, group, whatever, no? Which is for me super important, no? Because also it allowed to communicate with other kind of audiences. If I see the number of participants that are writing in the chat, there are people that are different from our I mean, TIPSI, TIPSI standard audience. And this is important, no? Because at the end, we need to come together, we need to collaborate to push this transformative innovation policy approach, which is not the only one, but we need to be consistent in that and share efforts and communicate this and, well, providing tools and other things. So for me, even if in some parts maybe is a little bit different from what we do in TIPSI, I think it's good to have these shared efforts together, and the basis for me are the same: learning, experimentation, looking for alternative metrics. So this is the same basis that we share in our way of understanding transformative innovation policy.
Thank you. It's really interesting you talk about the sort of network of networks approach. And this is really emphasised in the Charter, the need to mobilise new constellations of actors. I guess the question that's coming up for me is what sort of capabilities might be needed for that requires a different way of working, and what does that look like in practice? And perhaps starting with Charlotte, in terms of within an innovation agency, how do people need to work differently to achieve these kinds of aims?
I think it really involves most of the things that we are doing. For example, when you are designing a new intervention, you should not do it in the traditional predictive way, just launching and then have ex post evaluations of it. It really requires that, and basically you are always looking at how did you attribute to the changes that what kind of this counterfactual thinking about evaluating government interventions. We have to move from that and really see that the government and an agency like ours is part of the system, of the ecosystem, and we together want to contribute to the changes of behavior and of the system. So it really requires a different strategy, a different way of designing, a different way of implementing, evaluating as you run with it, and always being able to correct any kind of wrong assumptions that you had about how to really intervene in the system. So it creates completely another foundation for the way we traditionally have been working. So, and it will take time and require that we develop new capabilities, new processes, and new ways of interacting with other actors in the ecosystem.
And do you have any thoughts, just before we move on to Lena, on how that might challenge traditional ways of thinking about accountability within the agency?
I think one of the things that we have been discussing within the ETIN network is, for example, usually you focus a lot, even when we work with companies that we fund, you focus on activities and deliverables. You have this traditional way of looking at the project. You get some resources, money, and people, and then you plan for some activities, and then you focus on the deliverables. And all the focus becomes there. Instead of when I meet the companies, also, what do you learn from those activities? What does this deliverable mean for learning in your organization? So that you constantly have the learning aspect in the center, not the accountability of I promise to do this deliverable and I use the money for this activity. So you change the way you work, and we are trying to, for example, work with our deep tech companies to help them develop discovery-driven planning, work with milestones, learning milestones, rather than commit to deliverables that they get money for. And that's quite a different way of it. Involves IT systems that we support our monitoring of companies and organizations. We fund the process with students. So it's really a paradigm shift.
That's very clearly put. Thank you for elaborating on that. Lena, because you work in a very different context, how do you see, what capabilities do you think are needed to embody this approach?
Many, I think, is the best answer to that. But specifically, I think that working in an entrepreneurial way is fundamental, and that is done by then. I don't just mean like creating startups. Of course, they need to be entrepreneurial, but having this entrepreneurial mindset and working with kind of an entrepreneurial discovery methodology to discover where you can create change or create value or whatever you want to do. And there's a lot of like skills and methods that we can use that is developed in the startup community, in the entrepreneurial community, that can help us navigate complexity, because of course that is very much what a startup is about. You don't know beforehand which service is going to be popular, or which product is going to sell, because if you could, everyone would just invest in that, and the world would look very different. So that is a community that has many years of experience on how to create value in an uncertain and complex context. And I think there's a lot of best practices from that field that we can use much more. And combining the entrepreneurial methodology or the way of working with the understanding systems and understanding complexity, I think is a very powerful combination. And I would like to see much more related to that.
Thank you. And a really interesting point that adaptive action can be learned from entrepreneurial communities is often not done so within this context. Sandra, you've done work for TIPSI on capabilities and looked at the kinds of emerging capacities for delivering transformative change. Do you have any reflections on what might be needed?
Yeah, I remember the work we did in Vinnova and for more than 2 years. And then at the end, we reflect a lot on what kind of capabilities are needed from our side, because we are researchers, and at the same time, we are evaluators. So we reflect a lot on that. And apart from understanding theory and knowing the tools, the methodologies, for us was very clear that we need to behave in a different way. We need to establish a different kind of collaboration with practitioners, with policymakers, with people we are working with. And we have a paper, I can put the reference now in the chat, in which we reflect about the evaluators' role and attitudes. And I remember that we say, empathy and humility are relevant for us if we want to engage in this kind of experimentation, learning activity. Also openness, also adaptability, flexibility. So all of these kind of attitudes, which are more than capabilities for me, are a way of behaving, are really important in our experimentation. And if we really want to do this, embrace policy experimentation and learning, which is one of the bases of transformative innovation policy as it is framed in the chart. I have something to say about metrics. I don't know, Vicky, if can I?
Yes,
Because
please do go on,
I saw
Sandra.
in the chat there are some questions about metrics as well, and this is one of the action commitments of the chart. No, at the end, we work with a particular metric, which is, as Sherlock can say, we work with theories of change, but not in a fixed way. So it's a tool to reflect and learn. And in this and developing the theory of change, we use transformative outcomes, which is a particular metrics we develop in TIPSY based in transition theory, and it's a different way of understanding change. It's not the traditional research and development metrics, which is the standard one. It's a different way of understanding change. And also we use that in a flexible way in our formative evaluation approach.
Thank you. Yes, I did see there was a question in the chat, and it might be a good time to come on to this and we start to think about what application of the charter might look like. But this question around how it might be used in relation to a theory of change. And I wonder, Sherlock, and if you might want to reflect on that a little bit, how could you practically see these principles being used if people were working on a theory of change for?
We are currently basically now at Vinnova trying to introduce theory of change in all our, even our strategic areas, but also in our initiatives. And it's a really good way of creating a narrative, because as I was, one of the agencies in Sweden once said that understandability is much more important than measurability in the traditional way. So you really create a community or narrative to really get people mobilized to a certain kind of way. This is the way we believe we can in some way influence the ecosystem and improve it. But at the same time, always remember that as soon as you put that I will do these kind of activities or interventions in order to create these outputs and outcomes, then you of course, why do I believe in this? In what way can I test this? In what way can I really, with affordable loss, test if I'm right or wrong? And this comes into what Lina said, the entrepreneurial approach, even in policy. So you use an entrepreneurial discovery approach, utilizing the theory of change as a foundation for communicating the beliefs you have on your design and your implementation. And it's really a good foundation. And we basically tested also the transformative outcomes in the action forum we had together with TIPS EU and others last fall in Brussels. So really finding this way of designing theory of change in a new way and making it a foundation for the narrative and the way you can really create the learning experimentation is something that I would like to see pursued.
Thank you. So embodying a more curious approach as well to that process. I mean, Lina, we talked about theory of change, but again, your context is different to Sherlocken's. So can you think about examples of how you might apply these principles in practice in your context, like some very grounded examples for the participants?
Yeah, I can. And I think that I will start with you saying that I like to think of theory of change as kind of an hypothesis to change. Like what do we believe, and then we test it. And I can mention a couple of examples where we've used principles that are similar to the ones now that made their way into the charter and been hanging on to them when we've been designing efforts. And we've been working, for example, with industrial and urban symbiosis in the city of Helsingborg with source-separated wastewater and trying to see how fertilizer can be created and used based on this source-separated wastewater and the nutrients in it, where we took a completely different demand-driven kind of experimental approach based on affordable loss and this and that to experimentally create value networks around with this resource flow in the center. Even though it started with an hypothesis that it could be innovation procurement that could come into play, and it ended up with a co-created, co-developed fertilizer products with different actors in the value chain based on a very stage gate funded approach with an experimental mindset and so on. So that was like just one example on how these principles made their way into practice and actually created the results we we hoped for. We had no idea that that was what it was going to become, but it guided the way of working together. It was a way to communicate with the different stakeholders what we were doing and how, instead of working with the normal processes that they were used to. So that's just one example of quite a few.
Thank you. We'll come back to you probably for some more. And maybe I can turn to Sandra first, though. And Sandra, would you like to explain how within TIPS's context these principles might be applied in practice?
Well, when we are doing our formative evaluation, no, I think we are doing, well, we are experimenting with a strong focus on learning. We develop new evaluation metrics, so we are really aligned with the principles of the chart. In our case, I think we use in different ways. Maybe I can refer to what we are doing at the moment in Catalonia, in this particular region of well, in Spain, which is also an example of place-based, no? Because there is another principle, another point in the chart. We say apply a place-based innovation perspective for experimentation and learning. And this is important because not in our experience, not in every case we have been able to apply this place-based innovation. But when you work with regions and cities, I think the place-based approach is more, it comes in a natural way, no? Because you are more connected with the particular challenges, with particular actors, etc. And in this example in Catalonia, we are using the formative evaluation methodology and the theory of change, but more to develop a narrative of change. Instead of using that, no, as a way of tracking the process, no, the transformational process, which also we are doing, I think the more relevant use of the theory of change based in our transformative outcomes and transition theory and multi-level perspective is to help to develop the big narrative of what is going on in Catalonia at the moment, and that is really useful. And well, the people, no, the policymaker, practitioner that are involved in this process in Catalonia, they really appreciate, no, this use of the theory of change.
Thank you, Sandra. And are you able to share the name of the case study in Catalonia? I know there's maybe we could add that in the chat because some people have asked
I will
information. We have loads of resources about this work, don't we? Some great stuff that is on the Government of Catalonia website. So thank you. And Charlotte, we have quite a few participants here today from innovation agencies. So do you have some examples of ideas of how you could take this document and think about application within that context?
Of course, there's of course a lot of areas where it can be applied. One thing that I think is really interesting right now is that we are pursuing ecosystem development, coordinated ecosystem development. Today, at least in Sweden, we see it very fragmented and driven by projectification, you know, with all these calls that create short-term projects and no long-term sustainable changes. And what we have been created, and we launched it within ETIN, is now a playbook on ecosystem development or coordinated ecosystem development that we are planning to try to apply in one of the work streams within it. And that we are piloting with regional development of regional ecosystems. And it also creates another kind of strategy from national point of view, because previously we have been working quite a lot with different actors and project applications. Now we work through the regional development agencies to develop better living conditions, the ecosystems for companies within regions. So it's and this, of course, this development has to apply a lot of the principles that we have in the charter, and some of them are, of course, embedded in the playbook that we launched a few weeks ago. So we will try to return with the playbook discussion also later on, because that's also another publication or result that links to this.
Thank you. And I've got half an eye on the chat. I can see that there's an appetite for sort of, practice and examples. I don't know, Lena, did you want to talk a little bit more about some of the other examples that you had?
Yeah, I can do. And one thing that we've been working a lot with, there's also is aligned with the charter, is principles of using the more community and commons-based approaches than classic consortia-based approaches. For example, trying to build long-term viable communities, sharing resources, and see projects and project funding as something that goes in and strengthen that community and the commons to shared resources, rather than seeing that communities and commons are created within projects and have a start date and an end date. So that is one example on how that is used, and that of course links to other principles as well in the charter, where the experimental approach and the power law distributions that Charlotte mentioned, and there's a lot of the principles that kind of that has guided the way that we've created communities and commons, and that the direct result of that is that we have an innovation procurement community that we lead in Sweden with over 150 persons engaging in that, and that would never have happened if we would have done that in a normal kind of projectified way. So the interesting thing for me is to see how different results you get when you start really applying these kind of principles a bit more, and being a bit more aware and articulated on what you're doing and why. And another example from practice is that these principles can also maybe feel that they are a bit like high level, but I think they're extremely usable in a very practical settings. For example, the affordable loss principle that we've mentioned many times already today it's extremely useful when you work in, for example, a municipality or a project organization, or where people are used to have an idea of the outcomes, for example, on as a little thing as a workshop. If you don't know what's going to come out of it, you don't know if you can risk going to it, because someone might question that you spent 2 hours of your working time on something that didn't end up in anything useful. And by adding an affordable loss perspective in how to talk about it and how to reason about it, this discussion more becomes, can you afford losing 2 hours of your time, even if something doesn't come out of it? Can you do that? If you don't have to risk anything more than that, can you do 2 hours of your time? And if they can, you don't need to analyze and decide what's going to come out and what you will do with your outcomes and how that's going to be taken forward. You can just go into the workshop and just be there for 2 hours. So it has like kind of fundamental implications on how you work together in communities.
May I add also something?
Example, yeah.
May I add something? Like we have been, I was mentioning it in that we have this deep tech program. We are now financing 52 deep tech companies. And when you look at deep tech companies which are addressing really societal challenges in their core, we try to apply a lot of this principle in the design of the program, supporting with funding these deep tech companies. For example, usually you don't solve this as a single company. You have to look in how do you create systemic changes that really allows your product or your innovation to really prosper and change behavior in systems. So the systemic kind of play comes into the looking in the funding in the companies. They work with milestone-driven approaches, utilizing discovery-driven planning, which is basically utilizing a lot of the principles which we found in the charter. So you can apply it not only on the policy side, but in the way you work with individual organizations or individual communities. And Lena has been doing that in the demand acceleration aspect many times. So there's some those kind of examples, but we need much more, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting. And I love your example, Lena, a very simple way of addressing the kind of paralysis that can come from traditional approaches to evaluating any intervention that can just stall everything. And you've reframed that through your example. Now we've got about 5 to 10 minutes left, so I really wanted to turn a little bit to the process of developing this document and perhaps reflect on what you've learned from that process and what that was like and how that in itself embodied some of these principles. And Emanuela, I know you're going to come in at the end, but you might want to say something as well about this. Perhaps I could start with Charlotte, because you've really been very involved with this from an early stage. Would you like to say something about the ETIN network and the work that's happened to take this journey forward?
I think what I would say is that ETIN started as a traditional project, focusing on deliverables and activities that will lead to these deliverables, and that creates, in my view, having followed it, and Mikael might want to comment on this, creates some constraints in when you want to create this kind of, because ETIN is a community development, trying to utilize some of the principles that we have been encoding in the charter. So it has been an interesting journey from a traditional kind of project-based approach for creating these deliverables for the funding organizations that have put in money, into something that we now want to see as a community-based development, much along the lines of the charter, where we really are focusing on peer learning, helping each other to improve our abilities to design and implement things that are linked to transformative innovation policy. And as Lina pointed out, there's everything from the next workshop you are planning to and we had an example of what housewives in Uzbekistan did to what these kind of big things on the society. So it covers a lot of kind of broad set of activities that you can apply to. And now the ETIN is really about creating this community-based network that is really moving the charter from what it is now, design guidelines, to code of practice. And that's what I foresee and would like to promote, these kind of work streams and collaborations that we have in order to be materializing it in practice.
Thank you. And you invited Mikael to say something. I don't want to spring anything on him, but I will come back to you if you'd like to say anything in a few moments, Mikael. But perhaps I can move on to Lina right now to say something about your work on this over the last couple of years.
The work on which of the aspects? Sorry.
I think that journey of how the work on the charter has embodied some of the
of course.
principles in it.
Yeah, I think it has been, I mean, these principles are of course not invented from zero. I mean, there comes from different literature and a lot from complexity theory and this and that, which I've been quite engaged in. And the charter has been, working on the charter has been a great way to try to formulate and distillate kind of some, in some cases, esoteric ideas into something quite tangible that you can gather around and discuss and follow and try to kind of codify it in a way. So I think that this whole idea from shaping ideas and learning about theories to codifying what's actually in there in a way that can make it useful to put into practice in anything from high-level policy ideas into, as you said, just managing a workshop. I think that creating this whole chain and make this whole chain visible and understandable and communicatable is probably not a word, but I think that the journey has been very interesting in itself. And for me as the practitioner, I'm quite excited to just like have this launched now once for all and start gathering around it and spreading it and discuss it with colleagues and people in the community and start the work from it. Because as any other innovation that we do, the value, we start creating the value when it starts to be used. And I think to view the charter from that perspective, that we want it to be used to create value and to create some kind of difference. And being part of that journey for me is even more exciting, that having been part of the creation of it.
Thank you. And you touched on this network's quite diverse. I mean, there are lots of different types of actors involved in it. I mean, Emanuela, would you like to say anything about ETIN to introduce the participants today to the types of organisations and people who've been involved in that work?
Yes, thank you so much, Vicky, and thank you so much to ETIN members here today. It's been a really interesting discussion, and I'm really happy to see what this charter has managed to bring together. I've heard the phrase it's an interesting project from, I think, few of the panelists. I think interesting is put mildly. So we really tried to focus on a bottom-up approach in building this network, really encourage and facilitate the peer learning. So to just echo what Lina just said, it's been a very experimental process in itself as well. Some things didn't work out, some things did work out, but I'm happy to see that we've really sort of created a community that can come together and really discuss the practical implications of transformative innovation policy. So I'm really happy to see, that we've come to this point. To respond to what you mentioned, Vicky, yes, also geographically, we're quite diverse. So not only in types of stakeholders from policy side, from the private sector, from academia and research, but what we've managed to do is also bring in many of our program countries. So many participants from Eastern Europe, South Caucasus, Central Asia, and the Western Balkan region. And we've realized, I think, especially at the Action Forum last year, that it's so fruitful to connect these regions. There were many sort of conversations that were initiated there between stakeholders and between regions that previously haven't been engaged, even though it's quite relevant for those regions in many terms. So yeah, it's a significant milestone for ETIN, really showcasing the work that we've done so far, but also it's a starting point for the work to come. As Kjell Hakan mentioned, really shaping our activities going forward, and we hope to increase the diversity of the network as we continue to grow.
Thank you. And Charlotte invited if Mikhail wanted to say a few words. I don't know if it's a good moment to do that, Mikhail. Don't worry if it's not, but you were very involved in the early stages, weren't you? Would you like to say anything before we move on to Sandro?
I can at least have a few comments or a reflection. My name is Mikael Roman. I was the coordinator of ETIN between October 2022 and 2024 when we sort of launched the whole initiative. And I guess everything that has been said has sort of laid the ground for it. And Kjell Hakan mentioned kind of the new situation. We've got to bring in what we always call the unusual suspects around the table. And one word that I hear all the time is network. And I think network is kind of a critical word for us when we started off. And correct me if I'm wrong, Emanuela. But also the fact that how we perceive a network. Networks, we put a lot of network theory into this, how we thought about our own practical undertakings along the way. We experimented a lot, but the whole point was to see that the network, you go into the network not to gain anything per se, but you gain something from learning from the other. It's not about the money. It's not about you come in and share. We, as the leader of the network, only provide the conditions for people to actually share in between them. So, and I think that was key for us, because most people think about networks as something, oh, I go into the network and I buy myself in and I gain from it, and I gain more than anything else. You also have to share, and that's the point. So sharing and having people understand that they can actually gain by sharing, that was the whole point. And that requires a lot of different ways of working. And that's what we experimented with. And also the fact that networks have multiple effects. I know it multiplies itself, was something that was very important. I gain from bringing in someone that hasn't been there before. But also, mind you, and this is perhaps my final comment, is also that meant that you are automatically changing and challenging structures. So it's when Emanuela said that, yeah, we also managed to get in or to bring in the countries from Southern Caucasus, representative from Southern Caucasus and member countries. Yes, they were the ones that were never invited. Of course, they wanted to be around. So and it changed the dynamics. And those who were perhaps more hesitant to sort of let this flow were the ones that were established. It's all along the idea of breaking down socioeconomic systems, right? So you are provoking, yes, and you have to work differently. But then the understanding of what a network is, it isn't an address book. It is a dynamic. I think that's key. So
thank you, Mikhail. And thank you for coming in. I know you didn't have the opportunity to prepare very much. But I just wanted to move on to Anders, who is also going to close the session with Emanuela and finish with any kind of call to action in relation to ETIN. But Sandra, did you have any just final comments before we do that? Because you've been part of this journey from the beginning as well. Just very briefly, any reflections?
You too as well, Vicky. You know, the two of us. No, it's been a pleasure. I think it's been good, no, for me personally to also to learn and to discuss approaches to transformative innovation policy and try to find common points that I think the charter reflects as well, common points. And also in terms of amplify the network, I think it's good to have this ETIN network working together with Tipsy because we reach different people as we are seeing now at the moment, no? And I think it's a good way. And also for Tipsy is relevant, no? Work with intergovernmental structures. So for us, it's part of our way of doing, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been quite an eye-opener for me in terms of very different perspectives to the groups that we normally work with. So thank you. I'd like to thank everyone who's contributed, and I'd like to finish by handing over to Emanuela and Anders from UNECE, who are going to close with a few comments on how people can take this work further and look at opportunities to share application of the Charter in practice.
Thanks, Vicky. Maybe if I can just take 1 or 2 minutes to provide some details, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Anders. So once again, thank you to you and Pip for setting this up. It's been really great, and thank you also to Shell, Lina, and Sandra for joining in. We do have a call to action. We would very much like to continue to work on the Charter, as Shell mentioned. It's a living document. We would like to find ways of how to apply this Charter into different contexts, different initiatives. We've heard some very interesting examples today from the 3 speakers on the practical examples, including, for example, on place-based innovation. We're happy to say that Sandra recently moderated a discussion actually on place-based innovation, and we have another one lined up next Monday with a few of our members. So please feel free to reach out if you'd like to join that. But we want to continue working along these lines. So we welcome you to reach out if you have any ideas. If you would like to create a community, as Shell Hakan mentioned, around a certain topic area, we'd be very happy to facilitate that, to discuss how we can move forward. And yeah, we're very much looking forward to continuing our collaboration also with Tipsy, but also with Lina and Jakob on the innovation enhancing procurement stream. So please let us know if you'd like to engage there. And there's some further links on ETIN and how you can reach us in the chat. But over to Anders, who can also speak a little bit on what we have planned in October.
Good. Well, thanks, Emmanuel. I won't go into so much detail. I just first really wanted to thank Tipsy for organizing this. And what I have observed of ETIN, I started it. I was away for a while, and I've been observing since then. And what we should see as our measure and our metric of success in our role as a secretariat is actually the extent to which Tipsy and other members make initiatives like this, spend time on this, and engage it and really drive it. That's really important for us in the short term because we don't really have any resources to dedicate to the secretariat function. We will do as much as we can, but also I think in the long term to keep this network vibrant. We are actually trying to also use this charter as a basis for a so-called normative instrument within UNECE that we will try to get adopted at our committee next week, and then work on together with Kjell as our chair in preparation for and at the next session of the team of specialists on innovation and competitiveness policies. So that's one avenue that we are also trying to keep ETIN alive, and we can figure out sort of as we go along. I think what would be really valuable to maybe focus a little bit more on is this charter. On the one hand, it integrates ideas that have been out there, sometimes that have been out there for several decades. On the other hand, we see the practice and we hear comments like, there are regulatory sandboxes all over, but at the same time, there are no regulatory sandboxes. I think this shows that the difference between the ambitions that we have here, such as flexibility, directionality, and the actual practice is relatively large. And I think the niche here is to really start with concrete examples, to start with things that you are working on, to start with things that you are reflecting on, maybe frustrated about, but also optimistic about what you have learned, and then have a discussion around that, and then gradually move on to what this means for the charter, what could be developed in addition, what could be reformulated, and what would be useful. Because that's also where I've seen several initiatives and ideas that ETIN members have told me about that they found out almost by accident and couldn't have imagined before, and sometimes get really excited about. And that's what I think that ETIN and also our work on innovation in general, that's the approach, the strategic approach that I really want to, that I would really like to strengthen for our work, but also for the ETIN network. So many thanks and congratulations, and it's very, very important to have your suggestions and to have meetings like this that are almost completely on your initiative, and that we do it under ETIN and try to get as many useful things happening as possible within the limited resources that we will have in our section for quite a while. And I would note that there's always this assumption that the differences between, we call them our program countries, but these are middle income or lower middle income countries with economies in transition technically in our membership, that there's a difference between the challenges they have and that a country like Sweden has, for instance. If you look at it from the perspective of the challenge of bridging the gap between the practice and these ambitions, I see the same issues coming up in different manifestations all over, and I see enormous potential for having discussions around them, even from completely different contexts and also from completely different sectors. And what I'm especially excited about are these small scale experiments, maybe at the local, maybe even at the municipal level, maybe about something as simple as buying a plastic road as a service, or maybe some experiment with autonomous transport to complement public transport. Things like that are at a small scale and that really provide learning opportunities. I think those are the things to build on and then move up from there. So we can see the charter as the top-down part, and then we focus on the bottom-up part, and then move up to the implications for adapting and reframing the top-down part.
Thank you. Thank you, Anders.
I really appreciate it, and I look forward to working with all of you further. And thanks again so much for organizing this.
Thank you. And I wanted to thank, we have had a wonderful participation today from people, really interesting comments in the chat. Big thanks to Charlotte, to Lena, to Sandra, to Emanuela for your contributions, and also finally to thank David, Pip and Victoria as well for making this this session happen. So look forward to seeing you at the next Open Learning session. Thank you.